A mental suicide, Doctor. He destroyed his mind with an overdose of two deadly poisons, avarice and greed.
The greatest compliment that I've ever gotten was, "You brought my characters to life." Get a book, go into a closet with a light, and just read for 2 to 3 hours at least, out loud. And if you come out of that closet and you still love it, then go for it.
Hey, Book Dragons. It is your girl, Lindsay, from the Spine Bookshop with another episode of the Spine Bookcast, Chronicles of a Bookshop. So, I have another narrator today. Super awesome about it. His name is Bradford Wilson, also known as Bradam Whiskey. He's a narrator. You might have heard of him on TikTok, but you will not have seen him because he does not show his face, which means he could probably be super, super handsome or look like the Elephant Man. We will not know, but his voice is sexy. So get ready to enjoy his show. Bradford or Bradam, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. So let's get into it. How did you get into reading?
So I was never much of a reader,
Right.
except when I was forced to in school.
Sure.
But when I was about 20, I was living with a couple guys, and one of my buddies was reading all the time.
Okay.
And I remember walking by one day, and he had this huge book, and I just looked at him and said, "How can you do that?" And he said, "Do what?" I said, "Just sit there and do nothing but read." And he said, "It is the greatest joy of my life." And I
Wow.
laughed at him. And he said, "No, seriously." He said, "I'll tell you what, hold on one second." And he ran, he grabbed another book just as big
Okay.
and said, "Take this, read to chapter 3." He said, "If you get to chapter 3 and you don't want to read anymore, just give it back." And I begrudgingly said, "Okay, I guess." And took it, read it, and could not stop reading it. And I
Please
had to
tell me
go
what
back
book it is.
and get
I'm super excited. I want to know what book it is.
the book was The Eye of the World. It was book one of The Wheel of Time.
Nice.
And I was kind of lucky because he had the first 7 books. I didn't realize that it was going to be, I think, 15 books
Sure.
total.
Sure.
Um, and at this point, I've read every book at least 4 times, and I've listened to the audiobooks.
Oh, wow. Okay, so, you're now like in the it's the greatest privilege of my life boat as well.
Yes.
Love it. I love it. So now you're
One
also
of
an
my happiest days was when I got a library card.
nice. I love that so much. I love when I hear that people are so happy to get a library card. Like I have got at least five. Um,
Yeah,
so you're a narrator too. So talk to me about that. What's that like?
that is a very open question.
Yes, yes, it is.
um,
Go on.
it's a joy. It's a privilege. It's an honor. Um, I love being able to read and not make a full living off of it, but actually make income doing something that I love. And you know, the biggest thing for me, honestly, being a narrator is making an author happy with the way their book sounds.
Wow,
The greatest compliment that I've ever gotten was, "You brought my characters to life."
that's fantastic. I love that. How did you get into it? How did you get into narrating?
So I always had an interest in it,
Mhm.
and voiceover work in general. But that's for people in California, and you have to know somebody to get into that. And
Sure.
then one day I'm watching YouTube, and there's a guy standing in his closet talking about narrating a book and doing commercials. And I was like, wait a second, I have a closet. And I found out what kind of equipment that you needed, and I got the stuff that I could afford, and maybe spent $100 on all of my equipment, and found ACX, watched a bunch of YouTube videos just to do it and just started submitting auditions.
Now, let me stop you right there. What is ACX for those that don't know what that is?
I don't remember what it actually stands for, but it is basically Audible system for connecting authors with narrators.
Okay, okay, gotcha. Um, so what would you say have been the biggest challenges for you in narrating so far?
Honestly, not even narrating itself. It's been just health issues. Um, you know, about God, a year after I got started, I had to have back surgery.
Uh-huh.
And you have back surgery, you can't really stand all that well, especially in a
Sure,
2.5 by 3 foot closet.
sure.
So, I had to take a few weeks for that. And then I got close to being released for work and I broke my knee. So that put me out for about another 6 months.
Seems like you're a little accident prone. We're going to need you to be safe and healthy.
Just a wee bit.
Yeah, so stop hurting yourself, please. We would really appreciate that. Um,
I've made improvements, don't worry.
so what have been some of your favorite kinds of books to narrate?
So far, out of the books that I've done, I would say romance is what I'm most interested in.
Really? Why, if you don't mind me asking?
Um, there's so much more character,
Okay,
if that makes sense.
sure,
Not
sure.
characters, I think fantasy may be a little bit overwhelming for me. I would love to get the opportunity. Um, and there's one series that I'm really hoping the author comes back to me on. But I'm not going to talk about that anymore.
Okay.
Uh, but just getting to have passion
Uh-huh.
in what I'm reading, and being able to showcase that, I really enjoy.
I love that. What's one of the things that you've done or narrated the that you've liked the most so far?
So there is an author by the name W.S. Class,
Okay.
and he writes a wide variety of books. I think he mostly sticks in the fantasy genre,
Okay.
but there is a book that he wrote called Sierra that he had me narrate. And that has probably been my favorite project just because I love the book so much.
Yeah. What's the book about, if you don't mind me asking?
So it's loosely about a serial killer, but that's more in the background as you go
Sure.
through a family basically falling apart.
Oh no. Okay. That sounds like I love stories where it's not all sunshine and roses and daisies. I like things where you have like you've got this situation where someone is falling apart or I find that really interesting and I think stories are much more interesting when you've got that um dynamic that not everything is as it should be. You know what I mean? So that's pretty cool.
Right.
Now class is on TikTok as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think I've
Yes, he
actually
is.
spoken to him. We're trying to get him to come to the retreat in September. I'm really excited about it. So if you could narrate any book in the world, like your I don't know, what do they call it? Like Dante's peak of narrations, like you're the highest thing you've ever wanted to, your dream narration, what would it be?
I have never even considered that question. Um,
Really?
honestly, I have to say the next book that I'm doing. Um, and
Okay, that's
that
fair.
may sound a little trite, and I'm not trying to just push advertising. It's
Sure.
genuinely at any moment since I've been doing this, the next book that I'm going to be recording is the book that I want to record the most.
I love that. That's so cool. How do you get the books? Like, are you at a place where people are requesting you, or are you still doing auditions? Like, how does that work for you?
So I have not been actively auditioning until a few days ago, actually, for about 6 months.
Okay.
Um, so the work that I've gotten, I've kind of been sought out.
Okay. That's awesome. Um, what kind of books do you like to read now that you've kind of found your niche in reading? What kind of books are you into reading right now?
I'm still in fantasy. Um,
Okay.
like I said, it terrifies me as far as the idea of narrating a fantasy book,
Why
unless
does
it's
it
a
terrify
multi-text.
you?
There's so with different names,
Hmm.
um, that authors are so creative that they come up with.
Right.
I would just, well, this is you, so I'm gonna assume your podcast like you. There's so much that I would fuck up.
Sure. Yeah, no, we cuss on here. You're fine.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but don't you think that you would have that opportunity to practice? I mean, I fuck up stuff all the time, but I'm not
Oh
required.
yeah, but it's like every other thing in a lot of these fantasy books, and it's I would love the challenge.
Sure.
So I can't say that, I absolutely despise the idea.
Sure.
It's just I
Right.
am very much uh, just dig right into the book and go.
Yeah.
Whereas with a fantasy book, I feel like it would be um, more
Okay.
study.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. I can see that. Um, what were your favorite books once you started reading and you started getting into it? What were some of the books that you gravitated to besides the Wheel of Time series?
Oh, so I really got into R.A. Salvatore with
Okay.
his Dritz stories.
Sure.
Dritz. Um, like I just that was my favorite thing, like going to the library and they had like the first three, and then I found out that you could request books from other libraries, and
Yeah.
I was just blown away by that concept, which shows how incompetent I was at the time. But um,
You came into reading
yeah, that
late, we'll allow it.
I did. Um, Stephen King, honestly, anything by him.
Uh-huh.
I think I was talking to a friend today. Um, about how 3 years ago I had read everything that he had published,
Sure.
and now there's so much that I have to catch up on just because that man will not stop writing,
Yeah, he's gonna
which God
die
bless him for
writing.
it.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
What's the latest Stephen King book you've ever read? Like, what's the most current one that you've read?
I want to say the last one that I read was Elevation.
I don't think I've read that one. What's that one about?
It's about a white male who basically saves the day for a lesbian couple, but at the same time, he's losing uh, mass, I guess.
Like body
Um,
mass?
no, like he's losing weight without doing anything.
Okay.
And he's not changing, but his weight just keeps going down.
Kind of like
So
thinner?
I want to say kind of.
Okay.
It's like a mirror to that, I guess.
Okay. Um, what is your favorite book outside of fantasy? Is there something else that you've read outside of fantasy that you really, really like?
Let's see. I would say my favorite book is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas.
Good. Oh God, that book is so, so good. I love in Stephen King the Green Mile, or not, is it the Green Mile? Where one of them hands him the County Monte Cristo and he says it's about a prison break and the guy had never read it or something. I love that. I love that book so much. What did you think of the Jim Caviezel movie version of it?
Honestly, I had seen it before watching the movie or reading the book,
Uh-huh.
and it was my favorite movie.
Oh, it's so
Like I
good.
loved it. And then I read the book,
Hmm.
And I have such a hard time watching the movie now just because there's so much that they didn't go into, and
Oh yeah,
they took it in such a softer direction.
sure.
And that book made me want to have enemies. And I, I just don't, but I wanted enemies so bad just so I could seek my vengeance.
Oh, I love that. So, do you have a favorite scene from the County Monte Cristo?
I do not, honestly. It's
Really?
just the entire book.
Yeah,
Just it's phenomenal.
nice.
Anyone who hasn't read it, stop
Absolutely.
everything and go read it.
Right now.
Like get divorced if you have to.
No. Um,
You've read it, don't worry.
I have read it. I read it. I read it, and the first time I read it in college, I wasn't really sure that it was for me. It was a slow burn for me to get there and be like,
Yeah,
okay, I see what they're doing. Okay. Could you ever imagine narrating Count of Monte Cristo?
I couldn't imagine being allowed to, but
Why is
yeah, I mean,
that?
honestly, any book that you hand me, I will happily read.
Yeah. Um, so is there a specific genre of books that you absolutely refuse, no matter what, you would not read or narrate?
No.
So you,
And I say that because I also look at this as a job.
okay,
Um, there are so many triggers out there for
sure,
people,
sure,
but there are so many reasons to include different things in different books, and
sure,
different people
sure,
relate to different things, and they need sometimes somebody just needs something that nobody else wants to hear, nobody else wants to read, nobody wants to narrate.
yeah,
Um, so I feel like honestly, this is acting, it's voice acting.
sure,
And as an actor, I can't be choosy. I take whatever role is given to me.
sure.
So I have no triggers.
Well, so that's interesting that you say triggers. So I know that there has been this trend in the last several years to put trigger warnings in front of books. And it's changed, I think, the way people read books. Have you what, do you think that that's something that is a good evolution of books, or is that something that is problematic? Because I've had some authors say it's problematic, because it makes it hard to write the books because in writing it they think, okay, I've got to put the trigger for this in here. What about, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I can see where it would be an issue for an author, but I think that it's beautiful, because there are so many people that they can't handle certain scenarios or
Right.
situations,
Sure.
and it's traumatic for them. So I think if you can pick up a book and open it up and say, okay, this is not safe for me.
Hmm.
Like I said, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
We should be able to we should be able to find what we're going to enjoy when we're reading, because reading is about enjoyment.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. um so, like, talk to me about your process for getting ready to narrate something. Like, I know that you said you did it in a closet. Like, what does that setup look like? What does that prep look like for you?
For me, my mic and everything is set up. I plug in my headphones. Uh, I make room on the vanity for my laptop and plug that in. Um, make sure there is as little sound as possible. No ceiling fan. Close the bathroom door. Um, tell everybody in the house, please be quiet. I'm recording.
Sure.
And grab my script and go.
Yeah. um do you
Very
prefer,
basic.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said very basic.
Okay. I know that some narrators do female voices, and like females will do male voices and that kind of stuff. Do you prefer that, or do you prefer co-working with someone who does like the female parts and you do the male parts? Like, what's your preference for that kind of thing?
I absolutely prefer co-working with someone.
Yeah.
Um, I feel comfortable doing female voices. Do I do them well? I ask the listener. Um, everyone has their own preference,
Sure.
but yes, I definitely prefer. Honestly, I prefer working with as many narrators as I possibly can because I love the idea of having so many different talents connected to a story that I'm a part of.
Okay. What's the most amount of narrators you've ever worked with on one project?
I want to say there were seven.
Really? Okay. Do you mind me asking what the project was?
No, I don't at all. It was which one was it? It was Unawakened Fate and then Fate Awakened. So Fate Awakened. It was
Okay.
book two of the Vegas Wolfpack series by Amanda
Okay.
Nicole.
Okay.
Um, and that was to me like such a huge honor to be a part of that book because it's an incredible series.
Uh-huh.
I if you haven't read it, please read it. You'll be glad. It is a shifter romance. Um, I don't know. It's really good.
Yeah.
And I got to be the villain,
Oh, nice. So do you prefer playing the hero or the villain?
the villain by far.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
They're so much more interesting.
Okay, that's good. Okay, I will agree with that. Have you had a character that's been your favorite so far?
Let's see. Up to this point, yes, I will say that character. The the villain in that book, his name was Deacon Marlowe, and
That's a pretty
slight
good name.
Italian accent, and he has a great backstory. Book 2.5 is a prequel. Um, I really support this series, and I hate it because I was supposed to continue being Deacon, but because of health issues, I was removed from the project.
Aw. So, do you find it interesting, like if you come in for book two on someone and like some other actor has done book one, but now you have to pick up the helm and do that same character, do you try to do it in that same style or do you kind of make it your own? Like, how does that work? Because I know that there are several series where you get different voice actors playing a character. How does that work for you?
Right. So I did not even listen to the first book before I started recording
Okay.
on the second.
Mhm.
But it's such a small, like he has like one line in the first
Okay.
book, so it wasn't really much to compare it to. But I would say I would go in as myself,
Okay.
and if I get the job, I just make sure the author or rights holder is happy with that performance. Is this what you want the character to sound like? Are you okay with him sounding like this?
Okay.
His motivations, they lead me to believe this is how he's going to approach things. Is that
Uh-huh.
accurate?
Mhm.
If the
So,
author's happy, I'm happy.
okay, that's what I was going to ask you. So if they like give you feedback, I mean, because I know it's hard to come in, I would think, on a project where you have somebody else who's already done the character once. So do you find that feedback is helpful for you, or like, I know that you said you want the author to be happy, but like, how do you handle that feedback if they say, well, this guy did this, and I'd really like it to be more like this, and that kind of thing?
Honestly, the feedback is what I want more than anything. Because
Okay,
like I said, my goal in producing an audiobook is for my customer, the author, to be
sure,
happy.
sure,
It's their job to make sure that, you know, the readers are happy,
yeah.
but it's my job to please the author.
Okay. Do you ever want to get into movies or plays or anything like that?
I, honestly, I would love to, but that was my goal in high school
Mm-hmm.
was to go down that line of acting.
Oh, you did? You
But
wanted to be an
honestly,
actor? Okay.
I did. Yeah, I really did. Had the whole plan to go to New York and all that. And I actually have a buddy who went to New York. I was going to go with him, and he's acted in a few things. But, I'm glad that I didn't go down that path because it's very easy to get discouraged.
Sure.
Um, and I've seen that with him, and now he's a bartender, and he's happy with his life, but I know that was his dream, and if he had continued on that path, his life would be maybe the same,
Yeah.
because like I said, he's happy now, so
Yeah.
maybe he would have been just as happy then. um,
Okay. Um,
but I'm happy with voice acting.
yeah. Do you think that you would ever want to do like feature film cartoons and that kind of stuff where you go in and voice characters like for Disney and that kind of thing?
I would love that too. Yeah, I think that would be incredible. Doing any kind of voiceover work, but especially like different characters like that. I
Yeah,
don't know that I'm built for that,
sure.
but if someone picked me out of an audition and said, "Yeah, you sound just like the character. That's how
Uh-huh.
we want him to sound. We want you for this job." I would take it in a heartbeat. I would
Oh,
love it.
fun, I bet. What do you find? So earlier you mentioned about being Italian, you had to voice a character as Italian. Do you find accents hard to do? Is that something that you find difficult or does that come easy for you? And like how does that work?
I think my accents are incredible, and they are they are not always. But to me, they sound great. Otherwise, I wouldn't do them.
Sure.
And that's not everything, but the majority of the accents that I do, like I said, I think sound great. It's
Okay.
funny because the deacon, I got that role about 2 weeks after I got turned down for a role because my Italian accent was so bad.
Okay. So how do you take that kind? Okay, so let's talk about the rejection. So you get rejected for a role. How do you respond to being rejected for a role? Like what is your next step to be better for the next potential role?
Well, initially when I first started doing this, the rejection was devastating. I mean,
Yeah.
you put your heart out there, and you put everything into the auditions, and you just know, like that it was your absolute best.
Yeah.
And to get turned down for it was just crushing. And
Sure.
then you realize, that there is a voice for everybody. You
Uh-huh.
know, ev and I tell this to people who want to be narrators. I'm like, there is somebody out there that wants to hear your voice. So there can't be one person doing every audiobook. So I
Right.
had to learn to accept that. And I take it in stride
Okay.
because sometimes it's just because they didn't hear you. They get flooded with auditions, and you're 100 or 500,
Sure.
and they listen to the first 10 and just pick the best out of those.
Yeah. What is your advice to someone?
So
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, 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 you're fine.
What would
Go
be
ahead.
your advice to someone who does? You mentioned like, people who are wanting to get into it. What would be your advice for someone like that who does want to venture into narrating books?
I try to tell everybody the same thing. If it's something that you're genuinely interested in and you think that you would enjoy it, get a book, go into a closet with a light, and just read for 2 to 3 hours at least out
Hmm.
loud. And if you come out of that closet and you still love it, then go for it.
Yeah. How did you figure out like what all your equipment was and all that kind of stuff? How did you figure out what you needed to do to start that up?
YouTube,
Really?
100%. Yeah, I just researched what actor, and it's pretty basic. If you're just trying to get into it and you're just interested in doing it, it gets a lot more uh
I'm sure it can
advanced.
get
And
expensive.
I found like a cheap warehouse site where I was able to get equipment, and thankfully there's been a couple times where they've had something really nice. Like
Yeah.
usually it's, like a cheap Japanese knockoff of something. And you're just like, well, let's just see how the audio is. So you
Yeah.
go for it and try it because you got it for $13 and it's normally 60.
Sure. So do you have any special rituals when you finish a narration that you're like your celebratory ritual or anything like that? Like in The Misery, you don't go off to some ski resort and, get trapped by some crazy fan and spend 6 months in a bed with a psycho. Like what's your favorite reaction or your celebration for finishing a project?
Honestly, I really don't have one. I mean,
Really?
my celebration comes when the, not when I hit submit, but when the author actually closes it out and says, this is good.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So, besides making the author happy, right? What is your
Right.
next favorite thing about being a narrator? I know, no softball
Getting to
question.
read. No, no, no. Read. It's hard for me to pick up a book these days.
Hmm.
Um, just because there's so much going on in my life. But
Sure.
when it's my job and I get to say, okay, everybody's got to be quiet. I have to go to work,
Yeah,
and I get to pick up a book and just read.
I love that. Okay. Is there a book that you've read recently that you're like, this would be a really cool book to narrate?
No.
No?
And mainly because it's really every book that I read
Yeah.
would be fun to narrate. And um my love of the idea, because I always want to do the voice actor thing, because of, you know, being born in the 80s. You have the 80s and 90s cartoons.
Oh,
And
sure.
then through the 90s, you have like all the wild commercials where everybody's overacting. Um, that type of work always stood out to me. So audiobook narration, they call it the low hanging fruit just because there's so many books produced
Sure.
that, if you audition for 1,000 books, you're going to get one,
Sure. Sure.
you know, more than likely. I don't want to say that and then somebody go out there audition for 1,000 books and I get one. Audition for
Right.
1,001.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you have some narrators, like female narrators, that you like recording with? And like how do you guys discuss how you're going to do that? Because I assume you guys are not in the same room when you're doing that. So how does that work?
oh no. Um, the way that it's worked before is I basically know who I'm going to be doing the job with.
Okay.
Um, I'll get a little bit of communication on Discord. If we have questions about each other's characters,
Hmm.
like, how does this one sound? Can you send me a recording of, doing this voice? Um, how are you pronouncing this word? Things like that. There's
Yeah.
a little bit of communication, but for the most part, it's, you know, you got hired for this role, this person got hired for that role. And so,
So do you
but
like
I
record
love, like
yours
I
and
said,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
no, you're fine. Go ahead.
So do you like record your part and you send it to the author and then she records their part and she sends it to the author and then you guys and then the author like puts it together? I guess what I'm trying to ask is how do you get multiple people to record multiple parts for a book and then get it all set up together if you're not in the same room? Like what does that look like for those who have never done that before?
No, no, no. So typically with like dual narration,
Yeah,
where it's just alternating chapters,
sure.
and things like that, you're doing the male and female voices. So really, it's just submitting chapter one, two, three, four, five, and so on.
Okay.
Um, so you'll have just one person that submits everything. Now, whether that's submitting it to the platform like ACX or
Uh-huh.
that's sending it to the author.
Sure.
Um, there's always going to be somebody that submits them in order, and that's all
Okay.
that it's going to be.
So what, like
Um,
you send your
with
parts to the female and then she would send all of it together?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Yeah,
So it
I
would
ask
be
a bunch
like
of
that.
questions because I'm just not real sure how that works if you've got dual narrators, and especially like if you have 7 people, like how does all that get done, you know?
Okay, so with that project, it was a duet. So that means that you're that character no matter what chapter it is, like you are playing that or multiple characters.
Okay.
Um, and everybody just interacts with each other. So for that, you're either going to have one narrator that's doing a whole lot of work, or you're going to have an audio engineer, which is truly my favorite way to work,
Really?
because then it submits everything to the audio engineer and they compile it and just make it a beautiful piece of art.
Okay, I gotcha. So which one is more difficult, do you think? Sending it just with one person or having like somebody sit there and just audio engineer the whole thing?
I will tell you the biggest pain in the ass for being a narrator, in my opinion, is
Mhm.
editing. So
Really?
if you give me an audio engineer and tell me that all I have to do is get rid of my bloopers and, you know, put in tabs where they need to insert other lines,
Sure.
and my job is, and I get to just act.
Hmm.
I get to read the script and I get to act,
Okay.
and I don't have to worry about the editing. So I love audio engineers. They're some of my favorite people.
Okay. Like so we had one 2 weeks ago, Scott Wilnowski. Now he is becoming the audio engineer for this actual podcast, and we talked to him about that as well. I think you know Scott. It's so funny to me because book talk is and TikTok and author talk and all that has become such a small community when you really get to know the people that are involved. Like all the authors know each
Yes.
other, all the narrators tend to know each other, all the illustrators tend to know each other, all the editor, and it's such a small world. But none of these people live in the same state, which is what cracks me up about the whole thing about book talk is, oh yeah, no, I'm in Sweden. Okay, well, cool. I'm in Georgia, and we're gonna do this audiobook based in Alaska. But everybody knows everybody, which I just think is so cool about TikTok. Have you found that TikTok has enhanced your career, or has it, have you benefited from being on TikTok?
I have absolutely benefited, and career-wise is great. Um, because you're able to interact directly with authors and other narrators, and I've made like lifelong friendships off of
Hmm.
TikTok, but um, just on TikTok as a platform alone, like that, it's a gateway to like Discord and Instagram and all that.
Hmm.
But being able to just send a question out there in the world, like if I'm having such a huge issue with a character voice or some technical problem, I can put it out there. And, I don't know how other communities work, but the narrator community is just incredible because you can ask that question and you'll get 30 answers.
Hmm.
And, they are just so warm and welcoming. And I'm just so blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah. I love that about authors and just book people in general. I think book people in general are just some of the kindest people that you'll ever meet. And I think that that does include writers and readers and audio people and narrators and editors and all that kind of stuff because I think that like you said before, it's about making something and making someone happy about it because reading does give us that opportunity to escape and to go visit places we can't afford to visit or like dragons. We don't have dragons, but we do if we read smog. So it's always interesting to me that the community of book people, it's such a
Right.
nerdy accepting group of people. And I feel like narrators and writers and editors fall into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just to go back to the point of connection from people in different states, I mean, me and you would not be right here if it wasn't for TikTok connecting us.
No.
Like I'm in South Carolina, but I'm also in Tennessee at this moment.
Yeah. No, and I think that's funny too because I've met Tink, who is going to be on the podcast at some point, and she was from Texas and now lives in Tennessee, and we hang out all the time. And I never would have met her if it had not been for TikTok. And then we've got other
Right.
authors that are in my bookshop now that I never would have had it not been for TikTok. And I've made some of the best friends I've ever had that are actually going to come to AuthorCon next year and come to our writers retreat next year or this year. And I never would have had that without TikTok. So, and I always hear in the news about, oh, TikTok is terrible and it's so bad and it's just blah, blah, blah. But people miss the fact that this one social media app has brought people together in a way I don't think other social media apps have.
Right. I completely agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Um, so give me the three best things besides the author liking what you're doing. I want to know three things that you like about narration that you
Getting
didn't
my
know
legs
you
out
would
from under
like.
me. That I did not know that I would like.
Mhm.
Man, this is
The things that would surprise you. Yeah, these are not softball questions. We don't do that here.
yeah, this is tough. Um, goodness gracious.
Hmm.
Um,
I feel like we need to play the Jeopardy theme music here.
so I like that I do get to do different genres.
Right.
Um, I really want to be in romance, especially like dark romance, as my primary genre that I work in.
Okay.
But the fact that you get to do anything, and I get to read books that I never would have read before,
Hmm.
uh, that's incredible.
That's
The
one.
people that you meet, you
That's
know,
two.
like just the authors themselves,
Hmm.
you know. Let's see, number three.
Make it
This
a
is the
good
tricky
one.
one. Just the fact that I get to learn something new every time I step in to record and then go to edit.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that every day I'm learning something new. My stepdad used to say, don't ever be the smartest person in the room because if you are, you stop learning. So I totally agree with that. I think that's super. I love that that's one of the things that you like is that you're still learning. I think that's great.
right. I don't mind being the smartest person in the room as long as I can get to the room over after that.
Um, what do other people have you had friends listen to your books and be like, oh my God, I really love it. Like what have you heard people listen to your books and give you feedback that you're friends with?
I would be astounded if anyone listened to my books. But
Really?
no, honest, I haven't done great books up to this point, except for a handful.
Okay.
Um, they're like my first book was about a stair steppers, step mill, stair climber, all that stuff. So no one's listened to that,
Okay.
and I pray no one does. Um, but no, I have one friend who actually my buddy, you know, that was going to be an actor. Um he gets mad sometimes. Like he kind of has anger issues and doesn't want to admit it. And he told me one day, you know, I was walking around mad, and you know, I'm always walking around mad. And I started listening to one of your audiobooks as I
Hmm.
was walking down the street, and all of a sudden I was walking with Brad. Like my buddy Brad's just right there with me.
I
So I thought that was probably my favorite thing about one of my friends listening to something.
I love that. Have you ever met fans of your books and been that have said anything like, "Oh my God, I really," yeah, have you ever met an anonymous person that's really liked your book?
I have not. Now, do you mean like in real life?
Yeah, like have you ever gone to like a Comic-Con or anything like that where you've met someone who's heard your books?
No, I have not. The first convention that I'm gonna be going to is Booked in Chaos in November. So there's a possibility.
Okay.
Um, people have heard my voice at least.
Oh,
Um,
fun.
now my daughter, on the other hand, hasn't met someone that has heard my work, but um, she's in high school
Uh-huh.
And she had some friends that were a little bit older, and
Uh-huh.
apparently they were book talk girlies, and they did not know that I was her father, and they started discussing some of my work on TikTok, and she became very embarrassed. Did not tell them that I was her father,
Oh
thankfully,
no.
but that is what led to the creation of Bradam Whiskey.
Okay. So how did you come up with that name? That's a really interesting name. How did you come up with that?
Again, we come back to my buddy who lives in New York. His name is Adam Husky.
Okay.
And you have Brad Wilson, Adam Husky, you got Bradam Whiskey.
Oh,
And when we were in high school, we got a camera and we started making like movies and little short, I'll say short films, and different stuff like that. And we tried to get other people to actually pay us to do that for them, and nobody was interested. But we started Bradley Productions.
okay. Well, cool. It's a very interesting name. I dig it. I dig it a lot. Well,
Appreciate it.
Bradam, we are almost out of time. I want to say thank you so, so much for coming on to the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. It's been such a blast. I love talking to you guys that had do different aspects in the book world because it's always something new and interesting. So,
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And you're one of those people that do very interesting things in the book world. So thank you for everything that you do.
I do try. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Spine Bookcast, Chronicles of a Bookshop. Please like, follow, and subscribe, and tune in next week for something even cooler. All right, have a great day, you guys. Thanks for listening. Bye.